Hey guys, and welcome back to Gap Grace Point Online. This is week 4 of our hashtag followers series, where we look at how the lives of Jesus and his followers show for us how we should be living in today's world as followers of God. And so stick with me today as we hear the story of Jesus healing the blind man and how he went out and showed people how to follow him. Today's story is called Follow and Love, and we see how Jesus went out and loved someone even though they had a disability. Sometimes it can be tempting for us to only want to love people that look like us, act like us, think like us, but we are called to love other people regardless of how they are. Maybe their skin color is different, maybe they have different abilities to us, or maybe they're differently abled, but we are called to love people regardless of all these things because Jesus calls us to follow him and love his people. Imagine a time where there was a man that was walking through the streets of Jerusalem, streets that he'd walk through every single day, but never ever seen. This man was walking along, feeling the walls of the buildings as he was traveling to the place where he sat every day to go and beg. He was blind, and all he could do at that time was sit and beg, as he couldn't work, he couldn't farm, he couldn't plant crops, and so he relied on other people's donations to survive as a beggar. Now every day that man sat there and waited for people to give him money. Can you imagine all the conversations he'd overheard in his time sitting there? But one day, he heard a special conversation, and he heard someone say, "Teacher, why is this man blind?" He didn't really hear the teacher's reply, but next thing he knew, he felt someone touching him. He'd heard someone spit on the ground, hear the sound of soil mixing, and then suddenly he felt something wet and damp touch his face. It smelled like mud, and he realized that someone was putting damp mud on his eyes. Next thing he heard an instruction. Remember, he didn't know who was talking to him. He couldn't see. He just heard a voice that says, "Go and wash yourselves in the pool of Siloam." The blind man did as this man had said. Now we know today that this man was Jesus, and so Jesus had instructed him to go and wash the mud off. So the man made his way slowly through the streets, trying to find his way to the pool of Siloam. When he washed his face, suddenly his eyes were open and he could see again. And he said, "Wow, once I was blind, but now I can see." Imagine how excited he must have been to be able to go out and tell his friends and family, "I can see, I can see." And so as he told people, they started asking questions. How is this possible? How can you suddenly see? And all this man could tell him was, there was someone they called Teacher who put mud on my eyes, and I went and washed, and now I'm healed, and now I can see. People told him, "Go and tell the Pharisees what you've seen." The Pharisees were the religious leaders, the people who knew everything about the Bible and the law. And so they said, "This cannot be." What did they call this man who healed you? And they said, "Jesus." They started to say that Jesus is a sinner. He's not from God because he didn't obey the law. The law said that people shouldn't be healing and shouldn't be working on the Sabbath. And Jesus, regardless of this law, had gone out and healed this man on that day, on the Sabbath. Because for Jesus, healing people, caring them, and showing love to them was more important than following the rules. But the Pharisees didn't like this, and they said, "Jesus is a sinner. He healed on the Sabbath." Other people said, "How can he be a sinner if he did such a marvelous thing? He healed this man who could never see." And they tried to settle this argument. All the man said was, "All I know is that I was once blind, and now I can see." The people continued to argue. And then when Jesus heard all about how they were trying to settle this argument, he said to them, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And this man who was once blind and now healed said, "Tell me who he is, and I will believe." And Jesus said to him, "I am the Son of God." And the man said, "I believe in you, teacher." This was the first time that the man had seen Jesus, who had realized who the man was who had healed him. And he came to believe that Jesus was the healer, but also the Son of God, because of his love that was shown towards him. In the same way, when we follow the example of Jesus, caring for other people, healing them, showing love to them, despite their disabilities, despite their differences, we show God's love to other people. We show a small glimpse of the amazing love of God that we each have because God loves us so much to those people. In that way, we can show that We, as followers of God, are called to love other people just as God loves us. By doing that, we hope that other people will go, hey, I also want to be loved by God. I also want to show love to other people. So, as followers of God, in our hashtag followers series, we are called to follow and love. Our memory verse for today comes from Galatians 6, verse 2, and it says in the NIV, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. What this means for us is that we are to help other people, care for them, and love them just as God has instructed us to do. And in that way, we follow God's love and instruction. That's it from us here today at Gap Gracepoint Online. But don't worry, there's another episode next week for our hashtag followers series conclusion. Bye guys, see you next week.